Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to the ECPG 2022. Welcome to Ljubljana, welcome to Slovenia. Welcome to the Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Ljubljana. My name is Roman Kuhar.
And I'm Aleksandra Mrčela.
Nearly 3 years ago, I received an email from Petra Arens kindly asking me whether Ljubljana is willing to host the ECPG conference 2021. It was one of those emails that you do not reply immediately, so I put it aside. It was a big question. Didn't know how to answer that, although deep down I knew that there is only one possible answer: to accept the invitation. But I promised myself that I'm not going to do it on my own. So I called Aleksandra, and eventually she said yes.
Yes, but initially I said no, because I thought it would be really a pleasure to have you all here. It is really an honor to host a conference of this type at my university. But at the same time, I had so much to do. And I said, no, Roman. And then he repeated the invitation in his soft radio voice. And I said, okay, I will do it, but only with some serious help. And I called Jasna. And Jasna, unfortunately, is not with us. She said yes. I pursued her to work a lot. She did most of the work. She supported us both. And now she is ill, and she's saying hello to all of you. And I will pass her your hellos and gratitude for all that she done.
So here we are 3 years later. As you all know, we had to cancel the conference last year. We simply didn't want to organize yet another Zoom conference. So the procedure took much longer than Petra suggested in her first email. But we are very happy that the conference finally started, and we are glad and proud that all of you came here and the ECPG conference 2022 became a reality. In this time, things have changed dramatically, and the world is not the same as it was 3 years ago. And I'm not referring only to COVID, I'm also referring to democratic backsliding, which has increased not only in Hungary and Poland and until recently in Slovenia, it has become a global phenomenon. And I think this is one of the most important issues that we have to, and we are already discussing at this year's conference.
So we have a very nice program. We will discuss our theories, our research the results, our experiences, and the program is full of treats. So please have this enjoyment. I'm sure that we will all enjoy intellectually. But there is another thing I would like to stress. We wish you to enjoy Slovenia and Ljubljana. We wish you to enjoy our culture, our food, our music. We wish you to, for all of us to dance with us. So tomorrow is the dance party. So you are very welcome again in Ljubljana, and we want you to leave our university in Ljubljana with the best memories.
And now it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, our dear colleague Katja Lozar Manfreda, please.
Dear distinguished guests, Mr. Luka Mesec, the Minister of Labour, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities of the Republic of Slovenia, the keynote speakers, Ms. Slavenka Drakulić, Ms. Zorana, Baković and Ms. Jarc, all attendees, speakers, participants from all over the world. On behalf of the Faculty of Social Sciences of the University of Ljubljana, I would like to welcome you at the conference on politics and gender. Our faculty is the largest social science, public, educational and research institution in Slovenia, as well as among the largest in Central Europe. And the topic of politics and gender and the issue of gender inequality is one of the most important topics that our researchers are working on. And this conference is interesting, taking place at the period when in the present Slovenian parliament as well as government Parliament, there has never been so many women as just now. And we're also expecting a very competitive race in fall for the potentially the first woman president of the Republic of Slovenia. And if this was the case, probably we would not need to discuss the gender inequalities in politics. But since this is not the case in many countries, and there are many other issues about gender and politics to raise and solve, I think this conference is more than needed, of course. It is my hope that the conference would be able to achieve its objectives in providing an effective forum for researchers, practitioners, students to advancing knowledge in this field. Just before I leave the floor, I would like to thank the local organizing committee, Aleksandra, Roman, and Jasna, as well as the colleagues from the steering committee who have been organizing this event. I wish you a very productive conference and enjoy it all together.
It's our great pleasure that our Minister for Labor, Family, Social Affairs, Equal Opportunities is here, and also he is our Deputy Prime Minister, accepted our invitation to address the conference. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours now.
Okay, thank you, dear participants, dear friends. It's my honor to welcome you here at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. First of all, I would like to congratulate University of Ljubljana and Faculty of Social Sciences to hosting such a prestigious event. It is inspiring to be among so many researchers from across the world to discuss a topic that could not be more timely. When we are talking about gender, about our social rights, I believe it is very important to look into our past. Our past is telling us how precarious situation for women and other genders can be, and how much did we have to pass to come to a society where we can talk about relative and our underlying relative gender equality. From a Slovenian viewpoint, I'm glad to say that Slovenia has a long and fruitful history of struggle for gender equality. And in some cases, we were, or still are, the world leaders. In the 70s and 80s, there were moments where gender pay gap in Slovenia was the lowest in Europe. There were moments where women in Slovenia were among the best educated and the most employed in Europe. And that is, in some parts, still the case. As it is still the case that Slovenia is the country which, according to my information, has the longest and best compensated maternity leave that compensates 100% of the salary for a whole year. That is still in place in Slovenia. However, we are not immune to regressions. There were lots of examples of agendas of retraditionalization of society, but luckily they have not gained serious political momentum in Slovenia. There were some examples of Catholic Church and other right-wing institutions trying to undermine right to abortion, but luckily, because of the public backlash, that has not gained political momentum and stayed on the margins of society. We had a serious attack on different social rights. We have experienced that in the last 2 years, where we had a right-wing government that was trying to copy-paste Orban's or Poland's scenario to Slovenia. Luckily, we organized, we acted, we thought, We stopped that. And now the new government is bringing a new breeze to Slovenian public space, to Slovenian politics. As the Vice Dean has said before me, there has never been more women in parliament than now. Out of 90 deputies, there are 36 women. We also have, I'm from the left party, Levica. My colleague Nataša Sukic, she was the first women's DJ in Slovenia back in the 80s. And one of the earliest LGBT rights activists. She's now the vice president of the parliament. And talking about me, I'm currently Minister of Labor, Social Affairs and Family, but I'm establishing a new ministry that will be called Ministry for Solidary Future. And the person who will succeed me in the seat will be Simon Maljevac, the first openly LGBT person that will ever hold a ministerial post in Slovenia. What I'm trying to say is that even though we are looking at doomsday scenarios in some parts of the world, things as Constitutional Court's decision in the US&A shocked me to my bones, but the hope is not lost. We are still here, we are still fighting, and I believe that the future has the name of equality because of people like you, because of people who know that it is important to think, to act, to organize. So I wish you a fruitful conference. I thank you for past and future struggles. And most of all, I welcome you once again to Ljubljana, Slovenia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for telling us that the future is bright for all of us. In the past 2 years, we have worked with 2 steering committees. And I would like to thank both steering committees, everybody that worked in preparation of this conference. I think our collaboration was smooth, and I'm looking forward to future collaborations. Unfortunately, in the past few days, most of the steering committee, the last steering committee, got COVID. But now I do invite to the stage the remaining still standing people from the standing committee, and that are Ayse and Conny, please.
So, dear participants, it's really a true great pleasure to have you all in the room here, finally. And so in behalf of the somewhat sick steering committee of the Standing Group on Politics and Gender, we would like to welcome you to this already 7th edition of the European Conference on Politics and Gender in this beautiful city of Ljubljana. And it's great to be here. So this conference has been a flagship conference from the ECPR. We are one of the biggest communities. And ever since its first edition back in Belfast, I think it's been a very important community and space to meet, to share cutting-edge research on gender and sexuality, intersectionality. And it's really a community where we feel all stimulated and inspired, where we try to enhance diversity, a plurality of perspectives, of methods, and to share that. And it's truly a place where you can just drop ideas. And I already experienced that today, and it's great. So it's really a place where we make the profession more fun and challenge it as well. But it's also a place where we try to have some relaxation. So we're really happy to have the dance party tomorrow. And we invite you all there to make the profession fun as well and also just enjoy ourselves. And we are really, really, truly grateful that finally, at last, we are here all in this room at this great place. So, and it's really based on efforts of all of you, many of you in the room that is happening. I mean, it's not just a few people. All of you have participated and have been engaged and contributed as section chairs, as discussants, as paper givers, whatever capacity. And because of this, I think we really have a wonderful and very rich and diverse program with a lot of things going on. Very topical issues, backsliding, but also tomorrow we are hosting a session on the war in Ukraine, which is very important. And we also have hosted yesterday a conference for junior early career scholars, and there's also speed mentoring for them. So yeah, with the effort and the help of all of you, this is happening, and so thank you. And of course, we like to thank the Faculty of Social Sciences of this university, the Dean, the Vice Dean, for hosting us and making this our home for a few days. Thank you very much. And of course, a very big and special thank you for the local committee. It was a really pleasure working with you, Roman, Aleksandra, and also Jasna. It's such a great pity she's not here, but you've done an amazing job. You've been a very responsible and responsive team, and you've been incredibly flexible when we had to postpone this whole thing. And yeah, it was just a real pleasure. So I think we might just come back to Ljubljana at one point. And also not just you as the organizer, but also, I mean, we want to thank this great team of people in the black t-shirts that are so incredibly, again, responsive and kind, helping with all kinds of things. So thanks to them as well, and a warm applause.
So, and also hello and welcome from my side. It is a great pleasure to be meeting you all or seeing you all again in person. I will just continue where Conny just stopped, thanking very important people. As we all know, it was a long and winding road to finally have this conference in person. Our former steering committee members, Petra Ahrens, Sylvia Ayse, and Anna van der Vleuten, had already started organizing the conference in 2019. But when their term ended, they handed it over to the then newly elected steering committee. The former committee members put a lot of work in this, for which we are extremely grateful to them. Thank you all for the hard work, for the standing group, for reaching out to the local organizers and the ECPR events team, and for the trust you put in us for proceeding with the great work you had done that far. We also would like to thank the current steering committee members of our standing group, as all of them contributed to this conference in various ways. Thank you, Paloma Caravantes and Robin Devro, for organizing the early career events. I'm very excited and a little bit nervous. That's why the confusion. I'll start again. Thank you, Paloma Caravantes, for organizing the early career events. And thank you, Dorota Szelewa and Robin Devro, for coordinating the publishers exhibition. Very special thanks, of course, go to Conny Roggeband and Ivana Dobrotic for the enormous time and effort they put in organizing this conference, and also for guiding and leading the rest of us throughout the entire process. Unfortunately, Ivana is among the steering committee members who got sick with COVID and cannot be here with us today. Another colleague who also together with Ivana put enormous effort and time in organizing this conference is Rosella Ciccia, who can also, as I said, not unfortunately be here with us today. Last but not least, we would like to thank all standing group members and event participants, section chairs, panel chairs, discussants, presenters, without whose valuable contribution this conference could not have been held. We had been very much looking forward to this conference, and we hope that you are having a very good time in terms of both academic exchanges that are thought-provoking and interesting, but also equally important in terms of long-awaited reunions with beloved colleagues and friends. Thank you for being here.
Okay, so now I'm welcoming you to the first plenary conversation. We organized this plenary conversation instead of inviting just one person to be main keynote speaker, because we would like to provoke, to stimulate a lot of conversation after this one. We invited three eminent speakers, Slavenka, Drakulić, Zorana, Baković, Jarc. Ideally, Slavenka and Zorana would be with us here, but we are really thankful to the technology that enable this kind of hybrid, at least that conversation with people we would like, and next time will be with us in Ljubljana. So we will discuss we are happy that you welcome all three of you. We are happy that you accepted an invitation to speak from your viewpoints. You have very different backgrounds. You lived in different parts of the world. You are doing different things. Our three speakers are not for academia, and that is on purpose. We wanted to hear about feminism, about gender equality from people who are not directly part of our community. So that is why you are here, and we are happy that you will share your thoughts from your experiences with us. So let's start.
I would like to start this keynote with Slavenka Drakulić. Slavenka Drakulić is a Croatian journalist, novelist, and essayist. Her works on feminism, communism, and post-communism have been translated into many languages. Her noted works relate to the Yugoslav wars, notably about crimes against women in the Bosnian War, and the experience of following the legal procedures at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague. In scholarly circles, she is better known for her two collections of essays, How We Survived Communism and Even Laughed, and Café Europa. I strongly recommend these two books to you if you haven't read it yet. Both are non-fiction accounts of Drakulić's life during and after communism. Slavenka Drakulić now lives in Stockholm and Zagreb. And Slavenka, I would like to start this with a very basic question. Considering the fact that you have been traveling around the world and you've been living in different spaces and you experience different socioeconomic systems, how do you understand, how do you define gender equality, and how has this idea of gender equality changed over time for you, by moving from one space to another?
First of all, I would like to greet everybody and to express my regret that I'm not with you today. I was supposed to be there. I was supposed to sit on that nice sofa next to Aleksandra. And so thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor for me. but I really couldn't make it. But I'm really happy because technology makes it possible, even in this Zoom way, which all of us had to get used to. Your question is, yes, as you say, very basic, and I will also keep on a very basic level by saying that I'm a very old feminist, not old in age, but old feminists from Yugoslavia, where the first group congregated in 1978. In 1978, there was a seminal conference in Belgrade. The title of it was Drugca žena, which needs to be translated, but can be translated very simply. In other words, we addressed the questions which for the first time were addressed on that level, and also we invited international feminists to come, and they did come from France, from Italy, even from Hungary, from Germany. So it was from 1978 that I'm following this kind of questions. And as you said, I lived in 3 countries, in Yugoslavia. I lived in Croatia and also in Sweden. Sweden by coincidence, not so much by choice because my husband is Swedish, so but I share my life between these 2 countries now. And like a real old feminist, old-fashioned feminist, I will perhaps not surprise you to say that I'm very old-fashioned, which means that my perception, my idea of equality is that focuses on the law. I think that if rights are not built in the law and do not exist in the law, we can shout as much as we want, but we will not feel much better. That it has to be in the law. From that point of view, Yugoslavia was good. Yugoslavia was good. Why? Because it was a socialist country, and socialism has in this political economical system has built in emancipation of women. So we had a little bit like all other socialist countries, little bit. What should I say, problematic situation, and I will explain why I call it problematic. Because we had built-in rules and regulations and law emancipatory for women. On the other hand, we were living in a country that, for example, Yugoslavia was 80%, before the war, 80% agricultural country. And after the war, because of industrialization, the entire population of peasants moved into the cities and then create a big change, which was the case also in the other socialist countries. But it means one thing. It means that patriarchal culture was very, very strong. So what we feminists at that time focused on was precisely the difference between a woman in the public eye, in the eye of law, and her private life. And this is where we found a kind of niche, fighting for, so to say, a realization of the rights that they were already in the law. This created, of course, conflict with the structures, with existing organization of women, which was under the, of course, under the control of the Communist Party. And this was judged as something imported from the West. And why do we need to discuss emancipation of women when women in socialism were already emancipated? But nevertheless, there was a small group of women going on, writing about that. We had the media on our side. And so, but if I was to summarize my experience in Yugoslavia, then I would say what we wanted to do, not more than that, but not less than that. And this is to improve the already existing system. So there was no revolutionary idea about gender equality and gender laws. It was really improving the system. I can say that from the distance of 30 years now. Now, then I started to live in Yugoslavia. This is a newly formed republic, Democratic Republic of Croatia. So no more Yugoslavia, Croatia. What happened is that, of course, Croatia, like the other countries that became independent after wars in former Yugoslavia between 41 and 45, is that these laws that existed in Yugoslavia, and now we are focused on women, were inherited and incorporated in the law that of these other countries, among others in Croatia. Now, but something big had happened in Croatia, something which I don't know if we expected, if we could have guessed about it. I'm not sure, some did not, but it was all in all a step back, and not so much in women's rights incorporated in law as they are, not even the law on abortion, it stayed. But what has changed is the public perception of women's role in the society. Why? There are two main reasons for that. One reason is the conservative governments that were following one another in voted in law in Croatia, and the other, the influence, and when I say influence, I perhaps cannot even point how strong influence of a Catholic Church on life in general in Croatia. So much so that sometimes you wonder, if you look at the school books for the children, textbooks and so on, you really wonder if maybe this is not the secular state as we think it is. So the Catholic Church, of course, we know what is the Catholic position on Catholic Church and women. And so this, I would say, unproportional influence made this role of women different. And why is it so important? It is so important for two reasons, because we have always to watch and observe the potential change, potential tendency to change the law, like, for example, it happened in Poland with abortion. And the second is young women. How are they brought up? How are they growing up? And they are growing up with a different set of values. Let me just stop on that level. And then there is Sweden. Sweden, I don't think, could be compared to either Yugoslavia or Croatia. It is hard to compare one very rich country with a different culture, with Protestant religion, of course, but also habits and way of living. And there is no, so to say, basis of comparison, at least not today. And also the country that has a long tradition of socialism in that country, long tradition of fight for women's rights. And I think that women in Scandinavia in general, but especially in Sweden, are most employed in the world. So this, you have a working population of women who take no prisoners. They are really very strict. They observe their rights. Every party observes rights of women. Parliament observes rights of women and parity. And so it is, but there is something else. And in order to let's say, to give you a picture of that, I will tell you about a research that was made, I think, in quite some years ago, maybe 2000, in any case, before Me Too movement. There was a research, I'm sure you know about that, you know better than I have it written somewhere, but I can't recall who did that research. It was on the European level, and it was about how harassment women feel in different countries. So it turned out at the end of this big research that in European Union, the most harassed are, according to their statement, according to the research results, are women in Scandinavia. And that was quite fascinating, knowing that the countries that were also incorporated were women in Eastern Europe, for example, in Romania, where there is one of the most, the highest number of assaulted and beaten and raped and so on, women, or the other countries, my own country include. How come that women in Scandinavia were most harassed in whole Europe? You would never say that. What is the problem, or what is the difference? The difference is cultural, and the difference is that in Scandinavia, women do not feel any shame or anything. They go to the authorities and register complaints. This is the difference. I cannot see, I cannot imagine, it's hard to imagine that a woman in Scandinavia or a woman in Romania would do it in the same way, because women in Scandinavia has no hesitation, goes to the police, registers the complaint. So the reason that they have the most harassed women in Europe, in Scandinavia, is not because it is really so, but because they are self-aware and self-assured in a way that women, I think, from my research, from my own observation, from my own writing, women in Eastern Europe are not yet, in spite of the law that we have, and which probably in some elements is even better than their law. So this is a question of long culture of a country that can start. They can, first in the world, have anti-prostitution a law that then starts to spread in other countries. And if you talk today about women, they will mostly discuss the glass ceiling problem, which only indicates that, yes, of course, patriarchat is still there, but in the forms that are a little bit different.
Thank you, Slavenka. Thank you very much. Let me present now Zorana Baković. Zorana Baković is journalist, translator, and one of the best European experts on Chinese politics and culture. She was born in Belgrade, educated in Serbia and China, and from the late 80s, she works for Slovenian journal Delo, first as correspondent from Beijing, and since 2011, when living between Vienna, Zagreb, and Belgrade, as a commentator specializing in Asia. In 1984, she was one of the founding members and on editorial board of the magazine Cultures of the East. As a journalist, she closely monitors China's changes from the Cultural Revolution on to the Tiananmen Square protests and profound economic and social changes in Chinese society. With an excellent knowledge on the subject, she's also well known because of her sophisticated style of writing. Zorana, we heard from Slavenka. She took us from through time in 3 countries. Now you are an expert on Chinese society. We are discussing here gender equality. How Chinese people see gender equality? What is the concept of gender equality? How is that seen by Chinese people?
First of all, hello to everyone, and I also want to apologize for not being there, which I really wanted to, and I hope that next time we will meet in person. Thank you also for all those nice words about me. I also have to stress that I had lived in China for 35 years, which means a biggest part of my life. And I followed, when I came to China in 1977, I followed one phenomenon which was very interesting, and this is growing of female foot or feet. When I came to China to study, my roommate, who was 18 years old, was still biting her waist, and she wanted to be tiny and wanted to be fragile. And despite the fact that it was Mao Zedong who was the first person in long Chinese history who effectively forbade feet binding, which was tradition in China, there was still this ideal of a tiny feminine woman in that country. And by the time when Chinese reforms got a full swing in the mid-80s, women started wearing shoe size European 40, 41, 42, a real sign of emancipation. Of course, I'm speaking now in metaphors, but there was this development in the concept of women freedom, female freedom, which was different from so-called female emancipation that Mao Zedong proclaimed in the beginning, in the first decades of Chinese communism. Of course, yes, he gave the women right, first of all, to unbound their feet, then to divorce, and then also to have freedom of choice when it was about abortion. China was one of the first developing countries which in 1953 legalized abortion, and since then it has been legal. But on the other hand, in the same way that feet binding was for the purpose of controlling women and, of course, of arranging society in the patriarchal Confucian way, the motive behind Mao Zedong's decision to liberate women was also economic. He wanted to have double as much labor, and a woman all of a sudden became equal with men when it was about driving truck or working in fields or working in a heavy industrial plant. And that was not really gender equality. That equality based on equal suffering, I never felt was a real equality. But when it came to overall reforms in early 80s and then in the mid 80s, it became really a major topic of the Chinese politics and society. Then one could feel that Chinese women became free and much freer than ever, thanks to two factors. And this, of course, has to do with what Slavenka mentioned just a minute ago, that China doesn't have that kind of religion. China is not deistic, doesn't have deistic religion. And in Buddhism, there is no, or in any kind of, in atheism, which China basically is at the first place, there is no need to control women's body from that point of view. Also, in Chinese concept of life, life begins with birth and not with conception. So this was the basis where Chinese women could start feeling freer and more emancipated. They started indeed taking bigger, higher positions in their careers, and they started participating in politics. And they started which I found most important of all, they started feeling like equal parts of the society which could decide about their life's way of living and choosing this or that path in their private or career life. But what happened then? Chinese feminism all of a sudden became what you could see in Asia, in other countries, like in Japan, let's say, choice to stay alone. So they mostly choose not to marry, not to have family. And this, in my view, was kind of, yeah, I agree, this is also freedom, but this kind of negative freedom. Okay, they can choose to not have family, and that was almost the precondition to have a successful career. Because as soon as women would become a wife and then mother, there was this pressure, enormous pressure on her, which was actually paradoxical, because the more China developed and the more China became, let's say, a capitalist society or state capitalist society, this pressure became bigger on women because a woman would not be chosen to lead enterprise because it was supposed that she would go on maternity leave or she would have to take care of child. And I say child because that was one child policy in those years. So that was kind of forced equality, or I would say equality that women fought for but have never won till nowadays. Well, if we measure freedom of women by freedom, which now is very actual subject, and this is freedom to choose whether a woman would have a child or not, whether she would opt for an abortion or not, China was again very absurd society where you have forced abortion. So women had to go to have abortion if they would opt to have or wish to have more than one child. So that kind of pressure, that kind of policy that Chinese government applied was really anti-feminist. And what is happening all of a sudden is, from all this so-called freedom, so-called freedom to be equal with men in the heaviest labor or in highest positions, but with a prediction, with one condition, and this is that she is not obliged to take care of family. Now we come to the point where Chinese society all of a sudden, Chinese population all of a sudden shrinks. The moment when it starts shrinking, there is again this pressure on women to have more children. While we had this one-child policy till 3-4 years ago, now we have children policy, which says that women who are Communist Party members have moral obligation to have 3 children so as to help demographic recovery, because China is very soon going to be a less populous country than India, which is strategically considered unacceptable. So what we have now, and China has planned for everything, there is a plan of women development till 2035. And in this plan, it's written that Chinese government has to decrease number of abortions unless it is abortion made for medical reason or health, for danger of women's health. What does it mean? Of course, all Chinese feminists are now up on their feet, and they ask, what does it mean? How do you decrease it? Is China going to forbid it? Is China going to make a regulation which will say when it is allowed and when it is not allowed to have an abortion? To put it in 2 last sentences, China is one of the examples which shows that feminism doesn't develop to anywhere. There is no actually actual development or improvement in the position of women in China. And I could say, and if I compare it with much more developed countries in Asia, which leads us to Japan, actually feminism becomes only theory, and unfortunately ends up with the only choice of a woman, and this is to be alone or not. If she opts to be single and not have family, then she can think about some freedom or equality. If not, then it comes back to the same. Of course, we still have big feet to women. We still have 40, 41, 42 size shoes, but it doesn't mean that anything in reality has changed. And this is something I think to think about and something to consider when we speak about participation of women in institutions, in politics. I want to give 3 examples because I lived in China most of my life. I was born in Serbia, and I belong to Croatia because my family is in Croatia. We had in all these 3 countries 3 women in highest positions. In China, it was Mao Zedong's wife Jiang Qing. In Serbia, it's a current Prime Minister Ana Brnabić, who is the first openly LGBT person who is head of a government in this country. And in Croatia, we had President Kolinda Grabar, who was the first female president of independent Croatia. In all 3 cases, those 3 women not only didn't bring any improvement and progress for the status of women in those countries, but on the contrary, contributed to more inequality or deterioration of the position of women in general. So I don't think that institutional change, I don't think that just participation of women is the solution. I think that the very radical change of the institution, and I would agree with Slavenka, law and legal system is the only way. And I will finish with this example of my own son, one of my 3 sons, who took six months of paternity leave when his daughter was born. I would make it into a law. And I think that this is the only way actually to have some equality, although I'm doubtful whether this equality is possible in full at all. Thank you.
Zorana, thank you very much. I think this was the applause for the 6-month parental leave for fathers. Now I would like to move back from the virtual space to the Grand Hall of the Faculty of Social Sciences, and I would like to introduce our 3rd keynote guest, Teja Jarc. Teja, thank you so much for being here in person. Teja Jarc is a Slovene trade unionist and activist. She is mainly involved in youth policy and in the field of advocacy, both in labor legislation and more broadly in the position of young women and men at the labor market. Teja Jarc is seen as one of the most outspoken and politically active trade unionists of her generation, acting in line with her conviction that trade unionists should unapologetically promote and fight for workers' rights united. Now, Teja, you work in the trade union, which traditionally, and I would say, but maybe you disagree with me, even nowadays, it's primarily a men's organization. So could you tell us something more about how it is to be a woman in this kind of organization, and to what extent these, gender equality issues play a role in what you do?
Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a little bit of a cold. It's not COVID, just to warn you. I know that we're all afraid of this. I've been tested. It's just a combination of heat wave and air conditioning. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, thank you for this question. I was thinking a lot about how to answer this. And I thought that it would be best maybe to tell you a true story, an anecdote, how I actually ended up in a trade union world and what was my first experience with the trade union leadership. So yeah, I joined the trade unions 7 or 8 years ago, and I was a young woman. And one of my first ambition was actually to have a look of what is the youth involvement in trade unions. So I wanted to do a research among different sectoral trade unions, if they actually organize young people, what percentage, how they deal with them, if they include them in decision-making structures, and so on and so forward. And I had to, of course, present this idea to the highest body of our trade union confederation with all of the presidents of the trade unions, and I was put on the agenda. Of course, I was the last on agenda point because, who cares about young people in trade unions? So the decision was, the meeting was going on for a very long time. They were behind the schedule. Nobody really wanted to be there anymore. So when it came to my agenda point, the president of the confederation said to everybody, okay, so yeah, we have this last point. We know that we are late, but are you okay that we still discuss this point? And then one of the presidents of the trade union said, yes, okay, we can do it. You can speak because you're young and cute. So yes, unfortunately, this wasn't the reaction in the room. The reaction in the room from other men, mostly men, I must say, was that, of course, that they all left and nobody corrected him. And neither did I. And probably I left as well. And probably I even thanked them for allowing me to speak at this meeting. And unfortunately, this has been and probably still is the situation of the trade unions. There are not many young women there. And unfortunately, it's not being addressed properly. Because also the fact is that I'm not young and I'm not cute. And I wasn't 8 years ago. I'm a trade unionist, and I was a trade unionist just trying to do my job. A very important job, and this is the reason why I deserve to speak. And I wish that I would be able to say this 8 years ago, and I wasn't. But hopefully, with high certainty, I can say that I am able to say this now, because I hope that also in trade unionism, things are changing, and women and young women especially are getting more and more recognized and more present also at the leading positions. And if we look at the broader picture of women in trade unions, or even at the labor market, I just got the recent data from the European Trade Union Confederation, where I'm also involved, where I saw that women nowadays across Europe represent 46% of labor force. Of course, we still know that this percent is different in different countries. In some it's higher, in some it's lower. But if we look at 46% of the labor force, and then we looked at what is the women membership in trade unions, and it's 47%, and it's increasing. So women are getting more and more organized and more present in the trade unions as well. But is this being reflected at the leading positions? Unfortunately not. If we look at the women in leadership structures of the trade unions across Europe, we see that they only present 38%. And if we look at the most senior, the highest trade union position, it drops to 24%. So we see that women's representation, even at the labor market, and even in the trade unions, it's not being reflected in the leadership positions. And I think the trade unions, we still have a long way to go. Although I am coming from the trade unions, I would always say that I am also the biggest critics of the trade unions. We should definitely modernize. We should not be seen as an old structure that matters only to our grandparents or our parents, and it doesn't go with the changes that we see nowadays, not only at the labor market, but also in the society at large. And in order to move with those changes, trade unions have to reflect about their own internal structures, and they have to change. They have to modernize, they have to open, and they definitely have to give more place for young people. Not because they are young and cute, but because they are, of course, capable of doing this and bringing the positive change to the society as large.
Thank you, Dea. Thank you, Thea. Let's go back to our Zoom colleagues who are on Zoom. Slavenka, we are witnessing, unfortunately, very strong and a lot of openly aggressive attacks, policies, doings and thinkings and ideological attacks on feminism and on gender equality worldwide. When we organized this conference, I thought maybe we should ask you something very provocative. Did feminism do something or didn't do something to provoke or to enable such a strong opposition nowadays?
Okay, if you consider it very provocative, I don't think it's provocative. I think it's legitimate on one hand, but on the other it is not, because when you say feminism, then it sounds as if you are addressing something that exists as what? As a movement. This is the problem. I don't think that feminism or commit any sin of that kind or failed in a sense, because this is not unified movement. We are aware that there are different countries, and in different countries different needs, and women, mostly women, address these needs very much ad hoc. They congregate in reaction of some acute problem, and this is most of the case. And there is no one central committee that is saying, okay, girls, now we are going to do that, and now we are going to do this. Yes, maybe in the 70s, in the 80s, there was more of a organization, but then what happened is that it kind of dissolved in different directions. Basically thinking, okay, the all main achievements are here. We have rights to vote, we have right to school, we have right to, and so on, at least in the Western world. So there is no unified movement, therefore we cannot say feminism failed. But what happened, I would say, in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years, in the last 10 years, it's at least very visible that it is becoming, what should I say, divided, and it's becoming crumbling. And it's in that, I think identity politics is one example of that, but there are many other examples. So that the main, so to say, main course of action, which always should be on our mind, basic rights, are the basic rights really fulfilled? Is there anything that we have to do paying attention to this? For example, abortion. Abortion is always a problem. If it's not today, it will be tomorrow. So we have to pay attention to that. And one thing that I think is shocking to me, at least in European Union, is I think your minister mentioned pay gap. It is, I think, shocking, and that is shocking, that today in European Union, there is no law, there is nothing that commands that that women are paid the same for the same job as men. So the pay gap goes very high, goes very low. I think in Slovenia at the moment is rather low compared to Austria, neighboring Austria. So this goes, on average in Europe, it is 17% difference. I think it's unacceptable. Today in European Union, this is unacceptable. And then it can go as low as, I don't know, 5% to 25%. So this is one of the things that got lost along the way. It gets lost. I mean, no women today will organize throughout European Union marches because they are not equally paid. That is also shocking. The other thing that I'm worried about, which I think it's also something to pay attention to, speaking of young people and of a very typical experience of TEA, is that there is not enough awareness among women today. First of all, they do not see them as part of a gender role, and they don't see themselves as a group, as first of all, as women who should come together in order to protect, guard, and protect their rights. That is the problem. So if you think, oh, and this is mostly young women, of course, as Gloria Steinem used to say, the women are becoming more radical in a feminist sense the older they become, because then they are really confronted with the real world, with the world of work, with children, with different real life situations. But young women mostly are not aware, neither that their achievements or the laws are threatened, or that they are those who should fight for this, that they are women and nobody else, no organization, no party will step in and say, okay, I will take care of your needs. No, they will have to fight for their, whatever this needs or whatever it's required, they have to fight for it. And this lack of awareness among women in general, especially young women, and this fact that we are not able to achieve in Europe. I'm not going to mention America, because America, we know how it is. This is a terrible backlash now. Roe versus Wade, this has been a real slap in the face after 50 years. But there is this conservative tendency. Now, of course, America is important because this conservative tendency will spill over to Europe. It will spill over to our countries as well. It will only, so to say, give the wings to the other conservatives, which are everywhere and waiting for their time. So, but I mean, their women didn't even manage to not only abortion right, but the rights to take maternal leave, which is, I think, really one of the basic rights women should achieve. So these two things, not being able, so it means to me that we have kind of basically lost interest or lost the course for this, one of the most important things in life, that we should be paid the same money. And the other, that this lack of awareness. And why is it important? I feel it as really as a step back, because what happens in history, we have seen even in our small continent, is that it can always happen to women, can always happen a step back in history. I will again mention Poland, because there is always some government who will want to control their birthrights. We have seen now from what Zorana said about women position in China. At some period, they were not interested in controlling it. But now it seems that they are going to be interested in demographic politics. And I have to say, the small countries like Hungary, somebody mentioned Hungary, or Croatia or Serbia for that matter, are all in demographic problems. And to think that in the countries with demographic problems, with a huge number of people, young people leaving the country, living somewhere else in European Union, of this mobility within European Union, that this is not going to create reaction in the sense that there will be some government who will want to control and to force them in this or that way to have children, by stimulating them, giving some kind of money, privileges, whatever, or by controlling in the sense of authoritarian governments, which we have experienced, I don't know, Romania, for example. It's, I think, naive. So what bothers me is this naivety that is, I think, visible on all sides, while we are having these very important and very interesting identity policy discussions, which are on one level very, very important and interesting, but still, until our basis is shaking, we should think about these things too. Thank you.
Thanks. Zorana, as always, we are slowly running out of time, but very briefly, a similar question for you. From the position from where you come from, how do you see these populist politics, which is based on anti-feminism, anti-LGBT, anti-migration, anti-everything that feminism have been fighting for such a long time?
First of all, we live in time of conflict, and whenever we live in time of conflict, feminism, or I wouldn't say feminism, but the position of woman is in trouble. What we see now is leaders like Putin, who rides horses or tigers. I don't remember what he wrote on that picture. And now we have even President Zelensky all the time in this military T-shirt, and at the same time, Ukrainian women fleeing the country. So what is the conclusion? Men will fight, women will take care of babies and flee the troubled place. And we live in all other kinds of conflicts, like climate change. From my experience in Asia, any crisis actually comes back to women, and women are the biggest victims of crisis. Climate change also degrades the social position of women and takes away this social mobility for female part of the society. Economic crisis as well. You name it, whatever crisis we have, it will the consequences of those crises will come to the female shoulders. So I totally agree with this position and this point that we have to take big part of this change into our hands. And also, I think that we have to implement it into education. We have to kick out religious education from civil schools, because I don't think this is place for it. And not only that, but we also have to take care, and as parents, of course, now I'm in the generation of grandparents, take care of every single textbook. Is there anything that teaches our children that boys are superior or stronger, or in any other way in a different position or a better position than girls? Also, I think that what we should nourish much more carefully not only as an institution, as a theory, but also as a real equality. And this is gender equality in the sense of LGBTQ inclusion in every single subject. Unless we have this freedom to choose our identity, I don't think we will have any other freedom when it comes to gender questions. So if we have Pride parades only as some kind of, okay, now it's time for Pride parade, and then what I see in Serbia, let's say in Belgrade, people say, okay, let's have it, and they don't go and they don't throw stones on those people anymore, but it hasn't changed anything in their minds. Unless we have it from the kindergarten saying it's okay to be whatever you feel like, it's okay to choose and to build your identity, we will have this kind of silent segregation, which which of course is much better, may not end up in violence, which is already a step forward. But I don't see this as a step. This is step forward in a social, civilized living together. But I don't see any improvement in understanding of the core of the issue. So I would always go back to this education. And by education, I mean not only education in schools, but also in society and in families at the first place.
Thank you, Zorana, very much. We heard now about many features of the backlash, and it is not only against the gender equality, it is only affecting different parts of how we organize our societies and how we allow or not institutions like trade union to do their work. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, trade unions are many times seen as the actors who take actions when it comes to labor relationships or improving conditions at the concrete workplace. And unfortunately, when I say this, I have to admit that many of my colleagues actually believe that this is the only role of the trade unions. Really this narrow point of view, where we can act and where we can contribute. But in broader sense, of course, the trade unions should react to all of those changes. The topic about democracy, it's a trade union topic. The topic about transparency, it's a trade union topic. The topic about public education, public health, access to public services, of course, is a trade union topic. And all of those topics, if they would work properly, of course, would also help to lower the inequalities that we see in society. Where I see that the problem lies is that trade unions many times are afraid to actually have a very vocal say in all of those processes. On one side, because also our members are coming from different point views. They do not all agree and they are not all interested to discuss politics. They want to improve their working conditions, they want to have their salaries increased, and they do not want to talk about systems at large. So we have to find a balance how to, of course, do what our members expect from us, and on the other side, have a bigger picture in mind, because we cannot pretend that all of those things are not interlinked. We are living in two major systems, and yeah, talking about education that has been mentioned before, and we are never being told about those systems, neither in school, neither later on. And those systems are, of course, capitalism and democracy. And we can see the increase of dissatisfaction with both of the systems. It's time that we admit that the current neoliberal system, it's exploiting not only labor force, but of course also the environment, and we cannot continue like this. We see increase of inequalities, and if we don't tackle problems as they are, we cannot just focus on minor beauty changes at the concrete workplace, but we have to talk about the bigger systems. And then the same applies for democracy. People are more and more dissatisfied with how democracy works, because maybe it doesn't work, because maybe we see the elites, political elites, holding all the power. And this is why, of course, populism, far right, and all of those backlashes are the response to this dissatisfaction. And I wish that trade unions should have a better and more active role in responding to this, because it's not only a structure that represents workers for particular issues, but let's not forget, although we definitely should be critical about the role trade unions have today, we're talking about more than 100-old social movement that has been grown based on the, of course, class fight, seeking not only for improving working conditions, but for fairer system, for, of course, equality and more democracy. And I think that if we go back to our roots, if we go back to what's the role of the trade unions as such, we should also be more brave in communicating this. Not only communicating to, of course, decision makers, but mostly to our members, to workers. It's also our role to educate our members why all of those things are actually trade union topics as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, we now have 3 minutes for 1 or 2 questions. I don't want to make these too long because we need a break and we still have a PhD prize and then another round table, so it will take a lot of energy on our side to do all this. But if there is any pressing question or comment, there is a mic. So it's here in the first row. Yeah.
First of all, very much thank you for this diverse panel and very important contributions. I want to investigate a tiny bit China's enormous influence in Central and Eastern Europe, both as people migrate to the various Chinese stores. Those are literally the livelihood in many people in Hungary. I don't know, I don't see them that much yet in Slovenia, but they certainly provided literally survival for many people, especially in rural Hungary. Many of the women who work there, many of the people who work there are women. So even on a personal level, but also in a political level, China dramatically influences Central and Eastern Europe. So I just wanted to see how we see that connection, both from trade unions, the investments, the very different capitalist communist party influence. So both higher politics and everyday politics, I would love to see how people see that affecting women and also gender equality, which is a bit different story. Thank you.
Okay, this is one question, a big one, but we'll provide short answers. Any more questions or comments now? I know I scared you with these 3 minutes. We have 4. Erzsébeta, there in the back.
Just a short comment, because I think that when it comes actually to the young generation, I have huge faith in them, because in the Polish context, for example, these huge mobilizations which took place in 2015, 16 and 2020 were spearheaded by young women. And especially in 2020, we had huge mobilization of 200,000 women, mostly young women on the streets. And I think that the young generation is very much aware of what's going on. The problem is the closeness of political institutions, intermediary institutions, which doesn't really allow for all those young women to have their voice. So I just wanted to make this point.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we can go back to the panel with one final sentence or 2, if you can reply to the comments and maybe your final thoughts, but really very briefly if possible. Slavenka, can we start with you? Mike.
I do not have comments on the 2 previous comments because I understand them as comments. But the final, and of course, I know everything what happened in Poland and how much mobilized women are there, but I was speaking on the level of most of the European Union and particularly on the level of Eastern Europe, which is my, so to say, neighborhood. But no, my only thought would be that we the women should be cautious and should really not think that somebody else will solve our problems. So we should be alert and learn younger women also to be alert about their rights.
Zorana?
Well, I can also refer to this comment about influence of Chinese capital and Chinese economy, of Chinese concept of development on Eastern Europe, which is very obvious, especially here in Serbia, and probably all of you saw these pictures from Chinese factory Linglong here, which are horrible. Because this factory, this picture shows how this Chinese bosses treated labor here, workers who were sometimes from different countries, from Vietnam, from Asia, but also from Serbia as well. In one word, I think that it's in one hand, it's very important that European Union and also countries which are in a row to become members of the European Union have a common voice which will regulate China in Europe and not take Chinese rules of game as their own, because of course they are more profitable, they are very comfortable for every government, because of course when you have capital which is totally scrupulous, then you can earn more and very quickly. So it's urge for European Union to have one policy with one voice when it comes to China, because I don't think that China is evil country in general, but this regime is very dangerous and we don't really need it. We don't need Chinese exploitation of people, of labor force. We don't need at all Chinese corruption, which is also one little reason or big reason for inequality and hopelessness of any fight for equality, including gender equality. And for the rest, of course, I go back to the same, and I think that education has to improve, and I think that we have to take this Chinese saying that in every crisis there is a chance and there is a big opportunity. And we now have a couple of crises, including energy crisis and including security crisis, which requires each and every of us to think in a very new, different way. And if we think about, let's say, new sources of energy, new society which will be based on something very different from oil and gas, then I think we can also think about how this new society, how this new economy, how this new order may be more equal also in this respect, which is female equality, women's equality, gender equality as well.
Thank you, Zorana. And Taya, any final thoughts?
Yeah, maybe just a comment regarding China. I really believe that this is the worst example of capitalism that we can see really at its worst. Not only what's happening on the ground with their companies and sweatshops and all that, and little or even no standard for labor rights, but also what they do with their business model that they try to incorporate in other parts of the world. Of course, so we see their invasion of African continent or even Europe and so on and so forward. And I think that here definitely political power should put a stop on it. We have to stop pretending that this is not our problem, because they're producing our products, our phones, our clothes, our stadiums, football stadiums in Qatar or something like this. So I think this is linked with what I said before. For us, which probably it's not a surprising thing because I am a trade unionist, it all comes to the systems that we live in. And this is neoliberal capitalistic system that it's going to exploit everything and everybody as long as they can. So for my final thought would be really to rethink the systems that we have, to find the alternatives, and in all of those fights, of course, to bring gender perspective as well, because we cannot talk about the system, about the labor market without bringing the gender perspective. And we cannot talk, for example, about climate change without acknowledging that climate change is affecting women more in more dangerous way than men, for example. So all of those things are interlinked, and as long as we're not going to address this,
I guess inequalities are going to rise. So yes, my final thoughts, of course, changing the system and the revolution as always.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our three excellent speakers. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. It was brilliant. Thank you for your contributions. Hope to see you all, Zorana, Slavenka, again soon. You are here soon again, and preferably face to face in Ljubljana. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And now the final act of the opening, and that is the Joni Lovenduski PhD Prize. I ask Dorota to introduce the winner of the prize of this year.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Dorota Szelewa. I'm also the steering committee member. And it is my great pleasure and honor to present the Joni Lovenduski Prize awardee today. But before I do this, I just briefly say a few words about the award itself. So the Lovenduski PhD Prize in Gender and Politics is awarded every second year for an outstanding PhD dissertation in the field of gender and politics, including gender and/or sexuality studies perspectives in political science, international relations, political philosophy, public policy, and public administration. And I just wanted to thank the jury members, which were Nulaj Čalaš, Rosalind Kavagan, Hanna Kubatova, Lukas Platero, and Rosela Cicia, who was the chair. So finally, it is my pleasure to announce that the 2021 award winner is Ashlee Christoffersen, who is here. Ashlee, just show yourself. Ashlee Christoffersen's doctoral dissertation, The Politics of Intersectional Practice, Representation, Coalition, and Solidarity, focuses on the under-researched area of equality, NGOs and their interaction with the field of policymaking. Her research is based on the fieldwork conducted with networks of third sectors equality organization in England and Scotland, using interviews, focus groups, observation, and document analysis. The jury awarded this prize to Ashlee Christoffersen's outstanding dissertation for its intellectual innovation, rigor, and depth of commitment to exploring intersectionality in practice. This work fills in an important gap in gender and politics scholarship, the operationalization of intersectionality for empirical studies. Ashlee shows a firm commitment to drawing extensively on the intellectual contributions of women of color, providing a deep engagement with intersectionality in terms of research, epistemology, ontology, practice, and activism. This is a thorough and multifaceted approach that engages with the dilution of intersectionality but does not replicate it. The analytical and methodological approach are sound and clearly explained. The presentation of the analysis is empirically rich, providing extensive quotes and evidence. The research is rigorous, of high quality, very timely, and extremely innovative. And I will stop here because Ashlee would like to also present something about her wonderful thesis herself. Thank you very much. Once again, round of applause.
Thank you very much, Dorota. This stage is a little tall for me, sorry. So I just also wanted to offer my thanks to the jury members, as well as to my PhD supervisors, Akugo Imajulu, Richard Freeman, and Nasser Mir, to my mentor, Fiona Mackay, who I think might be in the room just now, who was really instrumental in the university nominating me for this award, and to my PhD examiners, Sharon Cowan and Gail Lewis, and finally to my research participants. I also wanted to say, as a kind of white woman receiving this prize for this thesis about the Black feminist theory of intersectionality, I also want to acknowledge that I'm, first of all, indebted to Black feminists as well as the kind of privileges that I have had to enable my having achieved a PhD and a prize, and that there are many kind of Black and of color potential current and completed PhD students who have been kind of excluded from the same opportunities and have had negative experiences in the discipline of political science in Europe. So the kind of dialogue about confronting institutional racism in feminist political science, which has been happening at this conference, is a really important beginning. And it's an issue that is kind of not confined to one section, but is really the responsibility of all of us white researchers. And I think what I'm going to do now, just very briefly, is share just an animation which was produced from my PhD thesis. Just give me 1 second. So I didn't produce this. Put on the subtitles. Yeah, so I didn't produce this. It was produced by an animator called Mary Martins, and it's really was made for practitioners and policymakers. So it's obviously a very kind of simplified PhD thesis. Yeah, and so my thesis was about different meanings given to intersectionality in policy and practice, and that is what the video is about.
Now, something happened to me a couple of weeks ago in Shepherd's Bush. I was stopped research for no reason. There was not one, not two, not three.
Intersectionality identifies the need to reshape the power dynamics throughout society that lead to the exclusion of oppressed and marginalized groups. How do racism and white supremacy, capitalism, sexism, and other structures of inequality intersect with one another? Intersectionality is used in 5 contradicting ways in policy and practice. Some advance intersectional justice, but others actually deepen pre-existing inequalities. In examining these social relations, what do we do with the knowledge of intersecting oppression? In generic applications of intersectionality, there is no focus or very little focus on any inequality in particular. The same work is delivered to benefit all. Addressing issues that affect everybody rather than issues that affect marginalized groups deepens inequalities. Pan-equality intersectionality works by addressing issues that affect different marginalized groups. This furthers intersectional justice. Multi-strand intersectionality is addressing different inequalities separately, but at the same time. This approach serves to deepen inequalities. Diversity within works by addressing the intersections within a marginalized group. For example, the differences amongst women. One inequality is viewed as more important than others. This will deepen inequalities. Finally, intersections of strands applications of intersectionality involve work by and with specific groups sharing intersecting identities, such as women of color and disabled women. No particular inequality is considered more important than the others. This advances intersectional justice.
Not 5, not 6, not 7, but at least 8 police officers.
Yeah, so that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashlee. Congratulations again. And this is now the end of the very long introduction to the ECPG Conference 2022. We will now make a break, but I do invite you back at 6 o'clock because we will have the roundtable debate with the pioneers of the feminist movement and the lesbian movement in Slovenia and to a certain extent also former Yugoslavia. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. So at 6 o'clock back in this grand hall. Thank you very much.